The CEO lost his memory after a crash. Only a night nurse refused to let him disappear. The man came in with rain at 11:47 p.m. An ambulance backed into the emergency entrance of St. Agnes Memorial Hospital, lights flashing red across the wet pavement. Chicago rain hammered the glass doors, turning the world outside into a blur of sirens, headlights, and water running down the curb like the city itself was bleeding. The paramedics rolled him in on a stretcher. Male, mid-30s. Possible concussion. Minor crash near the overpass, found wandering a block from the accident scene. No wallet, phone shattered, no ID. His shirt had once been expensive. That much was obvious, even torn at the shoulder and streaked with mud. His coat was soaked through, one sleeve ripped, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a man who had either lost a fight with a car or a very aggressive thunderstorm. Maybe both. Milo Bennett, the newest night security guard, stood near the intake desk clutching his radio like it might offer wisdom. He watched the man blink under the fluorescent lights, dazed and pale. "What's your name, sir?" one paramedic asked. The man swallowed. His eyes moved across the ER as if searching for something he had misplaced in the ceiling tiles. "Adrian," he said. Then, after a pause, "Maybe." Milo leaned toward Gloria at intake and whispered, "Is maybe his last name?" Gloria did not laugh. Gloria Hayes had been working hospital registration for 21 years, and the night shift had removed her sense of comedy sometime around year 7. She pushed a form across the counter. "Full name?" The man stared at the paper. "Adrian, I think. Date of birth." He looked at his hands like the answer might be written there. "I don't know." "Address?" "Nothing." "Insurance?" The word seemed to mean something to him. His brow tightened. Then he shook his head, frustrated and embarrassed. "I don't know." Gloria's expression changed. Not cruel, just colder. The way a door becomes colder than a wall because a door can choose not to open. "No ID, no confirmed name, no address, no insurance, no emergency contact," she said mostly to herself. "I was going somewhere," he murmured. "Board vote, Agnes. Don't sign yet." Milo shifted closer. "Sir, have you had anything to drink tonight?" The man looked offended with impressive precision for someone who could not remember his own birthday. "No. Any substances?" "I don't think so." "You don't think so? I'm currently missing several categories of information." Milo blinked. That was not the usual answer. The ER was already overcrowded. A man with a deep cough sat slumped beneath a vending machine. A young mother bounced a feverish baby on her knee. 2 teenagers whispered near the wall, one holding a blood-soaked towel to his hand. Behind the double doors, someone shouted for more gauze. St. Agnes at midnight was less a hospital than a dam made of tired people holding back disaster with clipboards and tape. The man tried to sit up. "Who manages intake flow here?" Milo looked around, genuinely concerned that the question might be for someone behind him. "Sir, I manage this hallway and sometimes the vending machine eats my dollar. So not me." The man frowned. "There should be a triage escalation protocol." Gloria looked at him over her glasses. "For a man who doesn't know his address, you have strong opinions about paperwork. I know how systems fail." "Then congratulations," she said dryly. "You're in one." A nurse came through the trauma doors pulling off gloves, moving fast enough to suggest she had been running since the beginning of time. Nora Hayes had the face of someone too young to be that tired. 28, hair twisted up with a pen, navy scrubs wrinkled, eyes sharp enough to cut through nonsense before it spread. She had just finished helping Dr. Marcus Lee stabilize a construction worker with a crushed hand and had not yet had time to drink the coffee she bought 3 hours ago. She saw the man on the stretcher. Then she saw everyone already deciding what kind of problem he was. That irritated her more than it should have. "What do we have?" The paramedic gave the report. "Minor possible head impact. Confused at scene. No ID, no clear intoxication. Complaints of headache, nausea, shoulder pain." Norris stepped close. "Adrian?" He looked at her. The relief in his face was small and immediate, as if he had been waiting for someone to say the name like it mattered. "Maybe." "Great. I love confidence in a patient." Milo coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh. Nora shined a penlight into Adrian's eyes. He flinched. "Headache?" "Yes." "Scale of 1 to 10, he hesitated. "I dislike imprecise metrics." Nora lowered the penlight. "Oh, you're going to be fun." 6, he said quickly. "Nausea." "Yes." "Do you know where you are?" "A hospital." "Which one?" He glanced around, saw a sign near the nurse's station. "St. Agnes." "Do you know why you're here?" "I was in a car accident." "Do you remember the accident?" "Rain. Headlights. A horn. A flash of white paper on the passenger seat. Then nothing, no." Nora's expression shifted. Not dramatically. She was too tired for drama. But her attention sharpened. Gloria approached with the chart. "We can put him in low acuity until registration figures something out. He's stable. He has post-traumatic amnesia. He is also unidentified. Those are not the same diagnosis." Gloria exhaled through her nose. "Nora, We have no bed space. We never have bed space and no payer source. Nora's jaw tightened. People don't need to remember their names to qualify for having brains. Dr. Marcus Lee appeared beside her, rubbing his forehead. He was 43, kind-eyed, and looked like he had made peace with exhaustion sometime during residency, and then had that peace repossessed. What's going on? Nora gave the summary. Marcus checked Adrian quickly, asked a few questions, then nodded. Basic neuro checks. Observe. Maybe imaging if he worsens. Nora heard the caution behind the words. Maybe imaging. Marcus lowered his voice. We're under review again. Uncompensated care, unnecessary diagnostics, all of it. Cole Meridian is looking at the numbers. At the name Cole Meridian, Adrian's hand twitched on the blanket. The room seemed to tilt. Cole Meridian, a glass conference room. A woman's voice. If we don't restructure St. Agnes, we bleed across the portfolio. A pen in his hand, a document waiting for signature. Then the memory vanished. Adrian grabbed the side rail. Nora noticed. You know that name, he swallowed. I don't know. But something happened when you heard it. I felt. He searched for a word and found only fear. Late. Nora studied him. Marcus sighed. Keep him under observation for now. But if admin pushes, admin always pushes. Try not to stab anyone with a penlight. No promises. For the next 20 minutes. Adrian remained in a curtained bay near the hallway. Because there were no rooms left, Nora checked him between other patients. Gloria tried to call the police station to see if anyone had reported him missing. Milo hovered nearby, pretending not to hover. Adrian tried to be useful, which was a terrible instinct in a man with a concussion. He rearranged the pulse oximeter cord so it would not tangle. He asked whether the hospital tracked door-to-provider time. He suggested the intake desk might reduce congestion by separating insurance. Verification from initial medical sorting. Nora stared at him. You don't know your last name, but you're trying to redesign my ER? I'm observing inefficiencies. You're wearing one shoe. He looked down. He was, in fact, wearing one shoe. Milo looked delighted. Mr. Maybe Adrian has notes. Despite herself, Nora smiled only for a second. Then Adrian closed his eyes, and when she asked him to repeat 3 words, apple, river blue, he could remember only apple. 5 minutes later, he forgot that too. Nora repeated the pupil check. His left pupil lagged. Not much. She went to Marcus CT now, before Marcus could answer. The shift administrator stepped in, holding Adrian's incomplete registration sheet. We're moving him out of monitored space. He's stable, ambulatory, and unidentified. We have confirmed insured patients waiting. Nora turned slowly. That was usually a warning sign. He has a head injury and worsening recall. He has no verified coverage. A brain bleed doesn't become cheaper because we ignored it. The administrator's mouth tightened. Nora, no, if I'm wrong, write me up. If I'm right and we move him, write his apology on the lawsuit. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then signed the CT order. The scan showed no major bleed, but it did show signs consistent with concussion after head trauma. Combined with memory gaps and delayed pupil response, Adrian needed monitoring. Nora did not gloat. She was too angry to waste energy on victory. Back in the bay, Adrian watched her hang the chart. Am I dying? Not tonight. If you stop trying to manage the department, that's reassuring. It was meant to be. She pulled a thin hospital blanket from the warmer and draped it over him. It smelled faintly of detergent and steam. He held the edge of it with both hands. For a man who could not remember his own life, the warmth felt almost like proof that he existed. Do you know who I am? He asked. Nora paused. Around them the ER kept moving. Phones ringing, wheels squeaking, someone crying behind a curtain, rain tapping against the ambulance bay doors. She looked at him, not as a payer source, not as a headache, not as an unidentified inconvenience in a hospital already drowning. No, she said. But I know you're someone. Adrian stared at her. The sentence was simple, maybe too simple. But in a night where his name, his home, his work, his history, and whatever terrible thing waited inside the words Cole Meridian had slipped out of reach, it became the first thing he could hold. He did not know who he was, but someone had decided he was not no one, and for that moment in the bright overcrowded ear of St. Agnes Memorial, that was enough. Adrian spent the next 6 hours in a curtained bay that was technically called observation, and spiritually called we ran out of rooms, but please, die near the hallway. Nora checked on him every 30 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes whenever she passed and caught him doing something irritating. At 1:12 a.m., she found him rearranging the supplies on the metal tray beside his bed, gauze stacked by size, alcohol wipes squared into a neat pile, tape aligned with military precision. Nora stopped at the curtain. Are you organizing my trauma cart? Adrian looked up from the tape. One eye was slightly swollen. His hair had dried into a shape that suggested he had lost a disagreement with both a car and gravity. It was inefficient. You have a concussion. That doesn't mean the gauze should live like this. She stared at him for a long second. "You may have lost your memory," she said, "but somehow you kept the voice of a man who has made PowerPoint employees cry." A sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh. More like his body had found laughter in an old file and opened it by accident. Nora marked something on his chart. Good. Humor response intact. Annoying but intact. The ear around them never slowed. St. Agnes at night was not quiet. It was only less supervised by the outside world. Machines beeped. Carts squeaked. Someone coughed like their lungs had filed a complaint. A child cried behind curtain 3. A janitor mopped around a broken ceiling tile where rain had begun to drip into a yellow bucket. Adrian watched everything. He could not remember his home, his last name, or whether someone somewhere was looking for him. But he noticed systems. The elderly woman who waited 2 hours because her insurance card did not match the new database. The young man with a swollen wrist who kept asking how much an X-ray would cost before agreeing to it. Dr. Marcus Lee on the phone with someone from finance, voice low but strained, arguing that a patient was not discharge ready just because the hospital had no reimbursable bed for him. Nurses moved like people trying to carry a flood in paper cups. Adrian felt a strange shame he could not name. At 1:40 a.m., Milo appeared at the foot of his bed with a paper cup of water and the suspicious pride of a man performing advanced medical support. Hydration delivery for Mr. Maybe Adrian. Adrian is acceptable. That's exactly what a rich amnesiac would say. I'm not rich. You don't know that. Adrian looked down at his hospital gown. I'm wearing socks with rubber dots. And somehow you're still judging the intake process. Milo grinned and stepped back as Nora returned. Don't encourage him, she told Milo. He's already one clipboard away from taking over the department. I'm trying to help. You are trying to optimize while concussed. There's a difference. She pulled up a stool and began another neurocheck. Okay, Mr. Acceptable. 3 words, lemon train blue. He frowned. You used apple, river, blue last time. Nora paused. That's actually good. I remember the structure of the test. That's less good. Try remembering the words, not auditing my technique. He looked almost pleased with himself. She asked about his birthday. Address, nothing. Family, a blank wall. Then she asked if he remembered anything ordinary. Any smell, sound, habit. He closed his eyes. A Windsor knot, he said slowly. Double, not half. Nora wrote it down, naturally. Your brain is bleeding mystery but preserving neckwear. A restaurant in Manhattan, French, too expensive. Helpful if you're being hunted by a sommelier. And his brow tightened. A stock price. Maybe medical sector. I remember it was falling. Nora lowered the pen. That is the most obnoxious brain injury I've ever seen. This time, he laughed properly. It surprised them both. For a moment, beneath the fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic, he looked less like a lost executive ghost, and more like a man who might once have been happy before numbers swallowed him. He looked at her as she checked his pupil response. Why nights? Nora's pen paused above the chart. She could have given the usual answer. Staffing. Differential pay, schedule preference. Easy lies, all technically true. Instead, maybe because it was 2 a.m. and he had no past to use against her, she gave him a small piece of the real one. My mother has Alzheimer's, early stage but progressing. Days are easier for appointments. Nights are easier for pretending I have a life plan. Adrian was quiet. Nora immediately regretted the softness. She stood. Don't do the pity face. I don't know what my pity face looks like. It looks expensive. He almost smiled. I was going to ask if there's support for staff caregivers. Nora gave a dry laugh. Sure, there's a poster in the break room that says self-care matters. It's taped above the coffee machine that's been broken for 3 months. The phrase hit him strangely. Employee Resilience Initiative. A conference room, a slide deck. Someone saying staff burnout can be addressed through messaging and peer encouragement. Him nodding, only half listening because the real agenda item had been budget exposure. The memory vanished before he could grab it, but the guilt stayed. At 2:26 a.m., Nora's phone rang. She looked at the screen and turned away fast. Mom, Adrian watched her shoulders stiffen. June Hayes had wandered out of the apartment again. A neighbor found her 2 blocks away, wearing slippers, insisting she was late to teach music class at a school that had closed 12 years ago. Nora's face changed completely. The sharp nurse disappeared. For 5 seconds, she was only a daughter too far away. She thanked the neighbor, apologized, promised she would call back, promised she would figure something out. Then she hung up, pressed the phone to her forehead, breathed once, and turned toward a patient calling for help. Adrian sat up despite the dizziness. Nora, I'm fine. The words were so practiced they sounded preloaded. You don't look fine, neither do you, and yet here we are. She moved to leave, but he spoke again. Can someone cover you? Can you go check on her? Nora's mouth curved without humor. We're down 2 nurses, 1 tech, and apparently 1 functioning healthcare system. I leave, someone else waits. He had no answer. That was the problem. He kept reaching inside himself for power and finding only fog. No phone, no title, no assistant, no ability to fix her mother, her shift, the broken coffee machine, the hospital, or the fear sitting behind her eyes. For once, all he could do was see it. And that felt both useless and necessary. The next hour blurred into alarms and footsteps. Then a man named Ray came in. Milo brought him from the ambulance bay, where he had been sitting under the awning with a soaked blanket around his shoulders. Ray was homeless, known to the ER, and drunk often enough that several people assumed tonight was the same. He complained of chest pain. Someone muttered that Ray always complained of something when the shelters were full. Adrian heard it from his bed. Something inside him recoiled. Not because he was noble, because only hours ago people had looked at him with that same quick dismissal. No ID, no insurance, confused speech, inconvenient body, a problem before a person. Ray sank into a chair near the hall, one hand pressed to his chest. Adrian looked at Milo. Call Nora. Milo hesitated. They're slammed. Call Nora. It came out like an order. Milo obeyed before he seemed to understand why. Nora arrived, irritation already on her face until she saw Ray's color. Gray beneath brown skin, sweat at the temples, left arm held close. Her whole body shifted into attention. Marcus, she called. The shift administrator appeared almost immediately, as if summoned by the possibility of unreimbursed care. Observation was full. Cardiac bays were full. Ray was not registered properly. They could transfer him downtown if transport became available. Nora's voice sharpened. He may be having an MI. We don't have space. Then make space. We can't keep every repeat visitor who says chest pain. Adrian stood. The room tilted violently and he grabbed the bed rail. But he stayed upright. Everyone looked at him. He spoke before he understood where the words came from. If he is presenting with chest pain, diaphoresis and radiating arm discomfort, and you delay evaluation based on housing status or prior utilization, your liability exposure is indefensible. EMTAL obligations don't become optional because the patient is inconvenient. Documented neglect in a cardiac event would be catastrophic. The hallway went quiet. Even Nora stared. Milo whispered, Mr. Maybe Adrian just became a lawsuit. Dr. Marcus, to his credit, moved first. EKG troponins, put him in bay 2. I'll move the ankle fracture to fast track. The administrator looked furious, but the words had already changed the air. Ray was moved. The EKG was abnormal, not dramatic enough for television. Serious for Mrs. He needed treatment. As staff swarmed around Ray, Adrian sank back onto his bed, pale and trembling. Nora came to him afterward with a cup of water. You don't remember your last name, she said. But you remember federal emergency care law. I didn't know I remembered it until I said it. That's not comforting. No, she studied him. The suspicion in her eyes had changed. It was no longer about whether he was lying. It was about what truth might be waiting. Who are you? Adrian looked toward the hallway where Ray was now being monitored, where Marcus was arguing again, where Milo stood straighter as if he had witnessed something important. The name Cole Meridian still echoed somewhere behind his damaged memory. Board vote. Agnes, don't sign yet. He looked back at Nora. I don't know, he said, then quieter. But I'm afraid when I remember, you're going to hate the answer. Nora did not soften. Not exactly. But she stayed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was no kiss, no confession, no sudden miracle in the crowded ear. Just a nurse too tired to pretend she did not care and a man with no name, beginning to suspect that his forgotten life had harmed the very place that had kept him from disappearing. And somehow, in that fear, there was a strange intimacy, because sometimes losing your memory was not the terrifying part. Sometimes the terrifying part was wondering whether your real self deserved to be found. Morning came gray and unforgiving. The rain had stopped, but Chicago still looked wet through the emergency room windows. The floor smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Nurses moved slower now, not because the ER had calmed down, but because everyone had crossed that invisible line where exhaustion became muscle memory. Adrian sat upright in the observation bay, a blanket around his shoulders, watching Nora write notes at the nurse's station. He remembered her name now. That felt important. He remembered Milo calling him Mr. Maybe Adrian. He remembered Ray's hand on his chest. He remembered the words Cole Meridian landing inside him like a stone dropped into dark water. But he still did not remember enough. Then the television above the waiting area changed everything. A morning news anchor appeared beside a photo of a black sedan, crumpled near an overpass. The caption underneath read, Adrian Cole, CO, of Cole Meridian Health, missing after overnight crash. The photograph filled the screen. A man in a dark suit, controlled expression, clean jawline. The kind of face made for business magazines and bit decisions dressed as strategy. It was him. The ER went strangely still. Milo? who had been drinking vending machine coffee with the courage of a man who had given up on flavor, nearly dropped his radio. "I called a CEO, mister." "Maybe Adrian," he whispered. "I'm either fired or promoted." Gloria looked from the television to Adrian, then back again. Her intake form suddenly seeming personally betrayed. Nora did not move at first. Adrian stared at his own face on the screen, and memory came back in sharp, broken pieces. A conference room high above the city, rain striking tinted glass. Evelyn Cross standing beside a screen, pointing to red numbers. St. Agnes Memorial, Unsustainable Loss Center. A proposal. Convert the hospital into a limited urgent care and outpatient hub. Reduce emergency services. Redirect complex cases elsewhere. A board vote scheduled for morning. His pen hovering above a page. Then another memory. Himself in the car, reading the final briefing. The name Agnes circled in blue ink. His phone ringing. A truck's headlights. Impact. Adrian gripped the blanket. Nora finally turned toward him. Her face had changed. Not shock anymore, something colder. "You're Adrian Cole." He could not deny it. "I think so." Her voice was quiet. "You are." He tried to stand, failed, and sat back down when dizziness cut through him. "Nora, I didn't remember. I believe that." The words should have comforted him. They did not. Because her next words came like a door closing. "The problem isn't what you forgot after the crash. It's what you were ready to sign before it." Adrian looked toward the hall where Ray had finally fallen asleep under a thin blanket, where Mrs. McCall from Curtain 5 still waited for a social worker, where Marcus was rubbing his eyes over another chart, where the old yellow bucket still caught rainwater from the ceiling. Nora followed his gaze. "This place is falling apart," she said. "I know that better than anyone. But if your company cuts us down to urgent care, people like Ray don't get moved somewhere better. They wait longer. They travel farther. They disappear quieter. I need to see the report." You wrote the report's signature line. That hurt because he could not fully remember it, and because he knew she was probably right. Before he could answer, the automatic doors opened with a rush of morning air and expensive urgency. Evelyn Cross entered with 2 attorneys and a young assistant carrying a garment bag. She was tall, polished, and looked at St. Agnes the way people looked at a carpet stain during a house showing. Relief crossed her face when she saw Adrian, then calculation arrived behind it. Adrian, thank God. He stood more carefully this time. Evelyn moved toward him, lowering her voice. They had a private suite ready at Lakeshore Medical. Press was gathering. Legal needed a statement confirming he was recovering. The board could delay public comments, but not the vote. Stability mattered now more than ever. Nora watched him absorb each word. She saw his spine straighten, his face smooth. The lost man from the night began to disappear, replaced by the CEO from the television. Adrian Cole returned like armor locking piece by piece over flesh. "We need to control the narrative," Evelyn said. Adrian heard himself almost agree. The phrase felt familiar in his mouth, too familiar. Nora stepped back, as if she had just watched a patient become a stranger. Then the ambulance bay doors burst open. A paramedic shouted for help. A shuttle bus had slid on wet pavement and clipped a delivery truck near the intersection. Not a mass casualty by textbook standards, but enough for St. Agnes. 6 patients incoming, 2 children, 1 driver with head trauma, 1 elderly passenger short of breath. The ER snapped into motion. Nora ran. Marcus shouted assignments. Gloria abandoned paperwork and began calling families. Milo stopped looking terrified and started moving stretchers. Ray, awake now and steadier, held open a swinging door with one hand because no one had time to tell him not to. Adrian stood frozen at the edge of it all. Evelyn watched the chaos with a grim expression. "This is exactly the problem," she said. "They're overwhelmed, under-equipped, undescent. Agnes cannot function at this level." Nora, passing with blood on her glove and a child's backpack over her shoulder, heard her. She stopped only long enough to answer, "No, this is exactly why we have to." Then she vanished behind a curtain. Adrian saw everything after that. Not as a report, as bodies. Marcus stitching a man squall arguing for a bed that did not exist. Milo sprinting to the lab with samples because transport was backed up. Gloria speaking gently to a crying grandmother while still entering data. Nora kneeling beside a little boy with a split lip, checking his pupils while her own phone buzzed again and again. Her mother, probably, June, lost or frightened or calling from home. Nora glanced at the screen, pain flashing across her face, then turned it over and kept working. No one in that ER had enough. Not enough beds, not enough hands, not enough money, not enough time to fall apart, and still, they kept catching people. A small girl from the shuttle accident sat on an exams bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Adrian handed her a cup of water because he had no idea what else to do. She looked up at him with swollen eyes. "Are you a doctor?" "No." "Then why do you look like you decide who gets help?" The question broke something open, not loudly. No dramatic collapse. Just a clean fracture through the last defense he had. Because she was right, he did decide. From rooms far away from blood, rain, missing rabbits, unpaid bills, confused mothers, homeless men, and night nurses who held a city together until sunrise. He decided who got help by calling it restructuring, by calling it efficiency, by calling it necessary. Evelyn returned to his side. "We need to leave." Adrian looked at Nora across the room. She was pressing gauze to a man's arm, her face pale with exhaustion, her jaw set against whatever private fear waited on her phone. "No," he said, blinked. "Adrian, I'm not transferring to Lakeshore. The press. The board vote is postponed." Her expression hardened. "You are not medically or cognitively prepared to make that decision. Then consider it the first medically useful decision I've made all morning." Milo, passing behind them with an armful of blankets, whispered, "Definitely promoted." Nora heard about the postponed vote 15 minutes later. She did not smile. When Adrian found her near the supply closet, she was restocking gloves with hands that trembled from fatigue. "I stopped the vote," he said. She did not look at him. "Stopping isn't changing." "I know. Do you?" She turned then. Her eyes were tired, angry, and hurt in a way he had not earned the right to soothe. "Saint Agnes doesn't deserve to survive because you needed it for one night. You don't get to turn our suffering into your revelation and call that justice." Adrian had no defense, so he gave none. Nora's voice softened by 1 degree, which somehow made it cut deeper. "If you remember who you are, then prove you can remember who we are." Then she walked back into the ER. Adrian stood there, no longer nameless, no longer powerless, and more frightened than he had been when he could not remember anything. Because now he knew exactly who he was. And he was not yet sure he deserved the woman who had refused to let him disappear. 3 weeks after the crash, Adrian Cole returned to Cole Meridian Health with his memory intact and his certainty damaged. The media had already shaped the story into something shiny. CEO Los's memory saved by night nurse at struggling hospital. Morning shows wanted interviews. Investors wanted reassurance. Cole Meridian's communications team wanted a campaign about compassion, resilience, and the unexpected humanity of community care. Evelyn Cross called it an opportunity. St. Agnes could be used as an emotional bridge, she said. They could honor the staff, praise the hospital's service, then still proceed with restructuring in a cleaner, gentler way. A heartfelt video. A donation. A ribbon cutting before the reduction of emergency services. Adrian listened from the head of the conference table, looking at the slide deck. On the second page, someone had used a photo of Nora taken by a reporter outside the ambulance bay. He closed the laptop. "No," Evelyn's expression tightened. "Adrian, public sentiment is an asset right now. Nora Hayes is not an asset, St. Agnes is not a redemption backdrop." The room went quiet. He ordered an independent review of Cole Meridian's evaluation standards, not only revenue, reimbursement rates, and bed turnover, but also emergency overflow, uninsured patient volume, distance to the next full-service ER, disaster response capacity, staff retention, community dependency, and what happened to patients if St. Agnes disappeared from the map. Evelyn argued, as he knew she would, investors would hate it. Social value was harder to quantify. Hospitals could not survive on good intentions. If every facility claimed moral importance, the system would drown in sentiment and debt. Adrian did not pretend she was stupid. That was what made the conversation difficult. "You're not wrong about the money," he said. "But money can't be the only language we use to define survival." For the first time, Evelyn looked unsure whether he had recovered from the concussion or become more dangerous because of it. The public board meeting was held in a crowded civic auditorium near St. Agnes. Nurses came in scrubs, patients came with canes, oxygen tanks, children, unpaid bills, and anger carefully folded into speeches. Reporters lined the back wall. Evelyn presented the original report first. Calm, precise. Red Jimjins, aging infrastructure, high uncompensated care, recommendation, conversion to a limited urgent care and outpatient stabilization center. Then Nora was called. She stood at the microphone in navy scrubs. Hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes shadowed from a shift that had ended 4 hours earlier. The moderator introduced her as the nurse who had saved Adrian Cole. Nora corrected him before he finished. She was not there as a symbol. Not as a sweet story, not as the night nurse in a CEO second chance. She was there as an ER nurse, and as the daughter of a woman with Alzheimer's, who needed a hospital close enough for neighbors to drive to when memory failed before morning. Her voice did not shake. St. Agnes was not perfect, old, understaffed. Its supply closet sometimes looked like it had been stalked by raccoons with budget trauma. Some nights, Nora admitted, she wanted to scream into the medication fridge just to hear something answer. A few people laughed softly. Then she continued. For people with private cars, good insurance, flexible jobs, and someone to call, St. Agnes might look inefficient. For everyone else, it was the last door still open. The room stayed silent after she stepped back. Adrian rose next. He did not tell the story of waking nameless. He did not mention Nora's blanket or Milo's jokes, or the little girl who asked why he looked like he decided who got help. He spoke about responsibility. The metrics he had trusted were incomplete. Worse, he had allowed incomplete metrics to sound objective because they made hard choices easier to defend. Cole Meridian had measured what St. Agnes cost, but not what it carried. Then he proposed a new plan. No emergency closure, no conversion to limited urgent care. Instead, investment in the ER, a nurse training partnership with local colleges, a fund for uninsured emergency patients, an Alzheimer's Day support pilot, infrastructure repairs, and a frontline oversight council with nurses, physicians, patient advocates, and community members. The vote passed by 1. Evelyn did not applaud, but she did not resign either. She agreed to remain and build the model so it would not collapse under its own good intentions. Adrian accepted that. Redemption needed accountants too, just not accountants alone. That evening, Adrian waited outside St. Agnes after Nora's shift. No Blacktown car idling at the curb, no flowers, no dramatic apology staged in hospital lighting, just 2 paper cups of coffee from the corner deli. Nora stepped out, saw him, and looked at the cups. "That coffee is terrible. You said it was honest." "I said it was terrible but honest. Don't edit my testimony." He handed her one. She took it. For a while they stood under the awning while rain began again, softer this time. Nora said she still did not know if she could trust the man who had nearly closed her hospital. Adrian nodded. He was not asking for instant trust. He only wanted to learn how to stay without needing amnesia to notice people. Before Nora could answer, June Hayes appeared beside her, escorted by Milo, who looked very proud of his temporary family retrieval duties. June studied Adrian. "You're the sad hospital gown man," she said, "but handsomer with pants." Milo made a sound like a radio malfunction. Nora covered her face. Adrian, to his credit, bowed slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes." June patted his arm. "Don't make my daughter sad. She already argues with vending machines." The air softened. Adrian asked if, when things were less chaotic, he could take Nora to dinner. Nora looked at the hospital behind her, then at her mother, then at Milo, who was pretending not to listen and failing heroically. "My life doesn't get less chaotic," she said, "but I can do a sandwich after a shift. If you don't call it a relationship-building strategy, I'll call it dinner." "Good." Weeks later, Adrian sat in the St. Agnes waiting room again. Not hidden, not nameless, not powerful in any obvious way, just waiting for Nora to finish her shift. An unidentified patient was brought in from the rain, shaking, confused, no wallet, no one beside him. Milo looked at Adrian. Adrian stood, took a warm blanket from the cart, and called for a nurse. No title, no privilege, only attention. From the far end of the hall, Nora saw him. She did not call it love yet, but she knew this much. Sometimes love does not begin when someone rescues you. Sometimes it begins when the person who once had every reason to walk past your pain finally chooses to stay. What would you have done if you were Nora? Could you trust someone who almost destroyed the place you love, even if he later tried to repair the damage? Remember, a person does not become invisible just because the system has no name for them. And sometimes the deepest kind of love is not a grand rescue. It is the quiet decision to notice, to listen, and to stay, especially when walking away would be easier.